Now we will begin for real. And I just want to give you a quick overview of our group. We were founded 18 years ago in response to the Iraq War, and we've been going strong ever since. And over these years, we've been standing up for peace and justice through speakers and actions and demonstrations, and joining with other groups to advance that cause whenever we can. So, for example, in October, we had a very inspiring talk with the legendary, and it turns out quite charming, Daniel Ellsberg. And last month, we heard from a recent exoneree. His name is Lucino Hamilton, and he shared his story with us of having been incarcerated unfairly for 26 years. And that was hosted by Jeff Cohen. And so I just like to say thank you to all of you who were there and made contributions to his GoFundMe page. You know, just in the matter of our meeting, and a couple days later, we raised quite a bit of money for him. So I want to thank you for your generosity. So in the next couple of months, we'll be taking up the issue of voter suppression, as well as addressing racial justice, especially in the suburbs. So we're working out the details of those meetings, and we'll be sending out emails to you, so please look for them. And then, speaking of racial justice, at the beginning of April 5th, we will be starting our demonstration on the corner of 11 and Woodward again. We took a break for the cold weather, but you know, we had been there all last year from the moment that George Floyd was killed. And it was quite successful. A lot of people come out, and we have a wonderful response from the cars. So please plan to join us. We're there every Monday from 5 to 6. So you can look forward to that, and the weather's good, and it will be a good thing for you to do. So tonight, we are very happy to hear from a member of our own steering committee and the co-chair of Peace Action of Michigan, Reverend Rich Peacock. Rich is a life member of the NAACP, a recipient of Greater Detroit's United Methodist Drum Major for Justice Award, and leader of the Detroit Area Peace with Justice Network. He has been a founder of the Troy Area Interfaith Group, Detroit Methodist Federation for Social Action, and 11th Hour for Peace. He was a pastor of United Methodist churches for 35 years, and he leads efforts for the adoption of peace and justice resolutions in the Michigan Conference. His latest proposed resolution is Let's Overcome Christian Nationalism. He is the lead writer and editor of Peace Action of Michigan as well. And on a personal note, he is the most knowledgeable person I know on the issue of promoting peace opportunities in this world. So I'm very happy to turn over this meeting to Rich Peacock. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. I appreciate the opportunity. Since it is St. Patrick's Day, I'll start with a couple of one-liners. They're probably groaners, so get ready to groan. But why is Ireland the fastest growing country in Europe? Because it's always Dublin. I think Steve knew that. And how can you tell if an Irishman is having a good time? He's doubling over with laughter. Well, Wars and Weapons, Realities and Roads to Sanity is a serious topic, but let's have a good time anyways. One of my professors said, nothing is more rare or truly revolutionary than an accurate description of reality. My goal is to present the reality of America's wars and weapons and 5 roads to sanity. The 2021 reality is the same as Martin Luther King identified in 1967. We overspend on wars and weapons, and we underspend on programs of social uplift. The reality is that we are still dealing with the legacy of Martin Luther King and how we have failed to uphold it. And not only do we have spiritual death, but we know about the death with the pandemic. 1 out of every 5 Americans has a friend or relative who has died. I'm having trouble going to the next slide. There we go. Whoops. Yeah. Some of the realities are that we are number 1 in wars and weapons spending. We're number 1 in global arms sales. During this first 6 months of 2020, America had a drop in life expectancy of a full year. Black Americans had a drop in life expectancy of 2.7 years. And next to Greenland, we're number 2 in suicides by guns, and we're number 1 in COVID deaths. Rabbi Abraham Heschel forecast our reality when he said the future of America depends on how we deal with Martin Luther King. How do we deal with the giant triplets of racism, militarism, and materialism? The problem in defense, according to President Eisenhower, is how far you can go without destroying from within what you are trying to defend from without. My thesis is that we are overspending on international terrorism and wars. We are failing to overcome domestic terrorism, white supremacy, Christian nationalism, and inequality. We're destroying the general welfare within our 50 states, especially in rural and urban areas, by overspending on tanks and torpedoes. In addition to the realities of militarism, I want to describe how we, the American people, can drive on 5 roads to more sanity. We can reduce the Pentagon spending by at least 10%. We can end our endless wars in the Middle East. We can stop Saudi Arabia's wicked war in Yemen. We can reduce our reliance on MAD, mutually assured destruction, and we can revive the Iran deal. Reality number 1 is Pentagon spending. 800 military bases in 80 countries around the world. 40 of those countries are led by dictators and repressive, undemocratic regimes. The United States operates 90% of the world's foreign bases. They're expensive. Usually the locals don't want them. The bases emit carbon like crazy, and the bases invite blowback because they are provocative. For example, it would certainly seem very easy to reduce the number of troops in South Korea from 28,000 down to 14,000. We know how to close bases. We've closed some 400 bases since the end of the Cold War in the last 30 years. But that's on land. On the oceans, we're also building about 80 more ships to be sure that we can overmatch China. We need a new strategy, peacemaking through diplomacy and development. The year 2015 federal year shows that the defense budget, which I call Pentagon spending, gets a bigger slice of the pie than everything else. The pie for this year, this federal year, October 1, 2020 to September 30, 2021, would also show Pentagon spending bigger than all the other slices combined. Now, Pentagon spending has increased from $640 billion to $740 billion. And we do not face any acute threats, but we spend more on defense than the next 10 countries combined, and 8 of them are our allies. The Congress and Trump raised Pentagon spending to $740 billion. This is the budget that Bernie Sanders tried to cut by 10% last December. He wanted to invest our taxes in communities that are ravaged by poverty, incarceration, and COVID-19. Bernie didn't win, but at least now there is a defense spending reduction caucus. It's Bernie and Elizabeth Warren in the Senate, and Barbara Lee and Mark Polkan from Wisconsin in the House. When Martin Luther King was preaching about overspending on wars and underfunding programs of social uplift, he was decrying the gaps in the amount of our taxes spent between the military and anti-poverty programs. You can see that in 1975, we spent $345 on the military, 153 on anti-poverty, the gap of 200 billion. Well, by 2014, the gap has grown to 447 billion. Every year we face a fork in the road. Will we continue on the overspending road? Will the military-industrial complex get more of our taxes for guns and wars than the rest of the budget? President Eisenhower showed us that guns and butter is a win-lose contest, and human needs always lose. Road number one to sanity is to cut Pentagon spending and fund the Green New Deal. For one reason, we need to cut Pentagon spending is that the Pentagon is the largest greenhouse gas polluter of any institution in the world and the largest consumer of fossil fuels. But you should also know that Representative Andy Levin is working on electric vehicle legislation with Senator Elizabeth Warren. Now, I find it very interesting that last December, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, voted with Bernie Sanders to cut Pentagon spending by 10% or $74 billion. This happens to be a priority of Representatives Tlaib and Levin. Now, some people think what the feds spend money on doesn't affect people in Michigan. However, Michigan gets 42% of its budget from the federal government. We can create many more jobs when the federal government puts our taxes into clean energy, healthcare, and education. For example, we are spending money to build 400 new ICBMs, the intercontinental ballistic missiles with the big nuclear warheads. That creates 10,000 new jobs. But the most experienced authority on nuclear weapons, former Secretary of Defense William Perry, says we do not need the ICBMs because we have nukes on submarines that are hard to find. And those nukes are extremely accurate and have large explosive power. Furthermore, William Perry says, and I quote, "They are the most dangerous and destructive nuclear armaments in the world because only one person, our president, would have only a matter of minutes to decide whether to fire them." That's why we need a no first use policy. Now, you might be talking with your friends sometime. Who are friends? Your friends, relatives, associates, and neighbors. And you might be talking about how we need some more good paying jobs. Well, what's the answer? According to Governor Whitmer, it was fix the damn roads. Just recently, the Michigan Dam Safety Task Force reported a grave situation on our waterways and dams. We need to spend a lot more, millions more, to avoid disasters like the 2 dam breaks that caused catastrophic flooding in Gladwin and Midland counties last year. Whoop, wrong way. Sorry. I want to say that there's been some good news just yesterday. 50 representatives sent a letter to Biden urging a lower Pentagon budget. 3 Michigan representatives signed the letter: Dan Kildee, Andy Levin, and Rashida Tlaib. You can send them a thank you. That would be great. And one of the authors of the letter said, if we cut by at least 10%, the Pentagon is still going to be able to defend Americans. Now, it's not just progressives who want to drive down Pentagon spending. We have some allies. They are, for example, the National Taxpayers Union, which is very conservative, and the Nonpartisan Taxpayers for Common Sense. And they have some commonalities in their list of common sense reductions. For example, the F-22 fighter jet. Way back in 2008, the Defense Secretary Robert Gates said it wasn't relevant. And the F-35 fighter jet is the most expensive weapon ever produced. And as you'll hear again and again, we can retire the 400 Minuteman ICBMs. So the first road to sanity is to drive down Pentagon spending. Reality number 2 is that our forever wars in the Middle East are really dead ends. We have a 20-year quagmire. 800,000 people have been killed, including 335,000 civilians. Millions have been displaced. It's expensive, costing you and me $8,000. Now there's a May 1st deadline agreed to by the United States under the Trump administration and the Taliban for the withdrawal of all US troops. And the Taliban have not lived up to the agreement. So this is a huge quagmire for President Biden. He has a plan. The plan is to include more players, the neighbors. What Biden's plan wants to have is a 90-day interim government that has power sharing. But as you've probably seen, the Afghan government and the Taliban aren't real interested at this point. But we have to remember that public opinion opposes these wars, and that opposition includes veterans. The veterans who have borne the brunt of 3 successive presidents who have refused to halt a failed counterterrorism strategy. We need to get Congress to repeal the blank checks for warring. Our representatives need to co-sponsor the bills that Representative Barbara Lee has in Congress. So the second road to sanity is to end the war and to bring our 2,500 troops home. But just this weekend, the Pentagon revealed we don't have 2,500 troops, we have 3,500 troops, and we have more NATO troops. We need to move all of them out of Afghanistan. That's road number 2, end the war. There is an iconic mural portraying Yemeni heritage and culture in Hamtramck. Yemeni families find comfort in this beautiful artwork. And do they ever need support with their beautiful motherland savaged by destruction, disease, and famine? This is reality number 3. Famine, a need for aid and protection. They can't even pay doctors. The UN says this is the worst humanitarian crisis. And we are what the Foreign Affairs magazine calls an accomplice to carnage. We have been complicit. We have sold bombs to Saudi Arabia. We have trained their pilots. We have provided logistical support for the bombing. Congress voted to halt arms sales to Saudi Arabia, but Trump vetoed the law. President Biden has ended support for Saudi Arabia's military operations, at least the offensive ones, he says. He's removed the Houthi terrorist designation, which should open the door for some humanitarian to get into Yemen and especially into North Yemen. And he has appointed a special envoy for peace negotiations, Tim Lenderking. Biden needs to keep the pressure on Saudi Arabia. So road number 3 is to end all arms sales to Saudi Arabia, even if some of them are labeled, quote, defensive. Well, reality check number 4. Nuclear bombs are powerful. The largest nuclear bomb is equivalent to 80 Hiroshimas. Just 5 nuclear bombs could create a nuclear winter. We, my friends, still live on the eve of destruction. We still live under the balance of terror. Now, I think what I'm trying to do is to find the sweet spot between scaring us and educating us. So back to scaring us and educating us. Mary McLeod Bethune questioned our financial priorities. She was a confidant of Eleanor Roosevelt and the founder of Bethune-Cookman College, one of the historically Black colleges in Florida. She and other African Americans were among the very first to question the necessity of dropping those atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they have continued to question the nuclear arsenal. Presidents can order a nuclear posture review. President Trump ordered one, so we now have a more aggressive nuclear weapons strategy. The 2018 nuclear posture makes more situations eligible for the US to use nuclear weapons. We are building an arms race. We want to win the nuclear arms race. We are ready not just to deter a nuclear attack, but also to wage and win a nuclear war. You may remember that Presidents Reagan and Gorbachev said, a nuclear war can never be won and it must never be fought. And then we have this huge modernization of our nuclear triad, and it is expensive over the next 30 years. The other element is that the US has been deploying usable or what are called low yield nuclear weapons. But let me say this, there is no such bomb that is a low yield. The smallest nuclear weapons are still almost as devastating as the nuclear bombs dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We have cruise missiles loaded with conventional warheads that can also be loaded with nuclear warheads. So how can the Russians tell the difference? They can't. The Russians could mistake a conventional warhead for a nuclear warhead and fire one of their nuclear weapons. I want to quote Matt Korda of the American Federation of Scientists. Once the first nuclear weapon goes flying, even if it's a so-called low-yield nuclear weapon, all bets are off. How would the Russians know this isn't a precursor to some kind of a mass attack? It's true. We send nuclear-capable bombers close to the borders of Russia, China, and North Korea. Who knows if the bombers are actually loaded with nuclear bombs? We are playing nuclear chicken. It's good to remember public opinion. Nearly 3 out of 4 Americans want us to destroy all nuclear weapons. However, we've got this modernization program, which, as you've heard me say, replaces 400 ICBMs. These land-based nuclear missiles are in Montana, Colorado, North Dakota, Wyoming, and Nebraska. But we have more than enough nukes, as I repeat, on our bombers and submarines. We don't need 400 ICBMs for an effective deterrent. And I want you to remember that Michiganders, according to the polls, do not support spending this $100 billion on 400 new ICBMs. Voters have higher priorities like clean water, quality, affordable health care, improving our roads and roads and bridges. Now, to top it all off, here comes the omnicider, the ground-based strategic deterrent. It doesn't have a common name yet, but Kevin Martin, the president of Peace Action, calls it the omnicider. It's huge, as long as a bowling alley, 20 times more powerful than Hiroshima. The Air Force wants to build 600. Just the startup cost is $100 billion. We could take another road and hire 1.24 million elementary school teachers. Oh, there's a typo. It should be 2.4, not 24 million, 2.4. We could pay for college scholarships for 2.84 youth for all 4 years. Or for this money, we could vaccinate the world. Finally, road number 4 to sanity. Presidents Biden and Putin had to renew New START by February 5, and they did for another 5 years. New START is working. It places caps on deployed bombs and delivery systems, and it sets up annual inspections. I just saw today in the Bulletin for Atomic Scientists, the Russians have about 1,440. Gives you an example of how this is working. I expect legislation will be reintroduced in the Congress for a sane nuclear policy. As long as 9 years ago, a Joint Chiefs of Staff study concluded the US could cut our arsenal by 1/3 and still be secure, no matter what the Russians did. More wisdom from Ike. We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial congressional complex. Now, you usually see the phrase military-industrial complex, but Eisenhower had the word congressional in his original speech, but then his cabinet persuaded him to take it out. But there really is a revolving door of people between the military, the arms industry, and Congress. And so it really does take an alert and knowledgeable citizenry to do something about it. And if you want to do something about it, if you want to be alert and knowledgeable, follow the money in terms of modernization. So road number 4 to modernization cuts the so-called modernization of nuclear weapons. They're very, very expensive and unnecessary. And actually, it's not modernization, it's escalation. Biden should direct a new nuclear force posture to eliminate the 400 ground-based ICBMs out west, cancel the omnicider, and take the nuclear warheads off of all cruise missiles. Actually, that should be never put them on. Okay. Now, road number 5 is dealing with the Iran deal. It basically stopped Iran from building a nuclear bomb for 10 years, and it was working. The deal included the most invasive and rigorous inspections in history. Our partners, including Russia and China, are still in the deal. But Trump opted out and deployed maximum pressure sanctions. In turn, Iran has upped its enrichment of uranium. Trump dropped the ball. So the ball is in our court. Biden needs to take the initiative and start reducing sanctions on Iran as we had promised. Now, of course, Biden doesn't want to look weak. So all that he has done is asked for and received an invitation from European nations to rejoin the negotiations. Of course, Iran's moderate leaders can't afford to look weak either, with hardliners campaigning to replace them in the June election. Time is of the essence. One thing that can be done is we need to get our senators, Gary Peters and Debbie Stabenow, to co-sponsor Senator Ed Markey's Iran Diplomacy Act of 2021. This is crucial right now because somebody is organizing letters from Congress to Biden calling for brand new negotiations on numerous issues. It's like they're throwing the kitchen sink at Iran, and that would effectively kill the Iran deal. So, what are the prospects for change with President Biden? Well, in the past, he's been a supporter of nuclear arms control, but not necessarily disarmament. He's been a critic of Trump's nuclear policies, and he says we should only have nuclear weapons for deterrence, and diplomacy should be first. He may drop some sanctions on Iran, but that needs public pressure. He will, we understand, direct an overhaul of the nuclear posture. We would love to see in that a policy of no first use of nuclear weapons. No single person should be able to do that all by himself. He should have to have concurrence from the cabinet or Congress in order to fire something. You should take the ICBMs off high alert. You see, the problem with ICBMs is that there's only a matter of minutes to decide to launch them, and in 30 minutes, they explode in Russia. And so the problem is that there's a tendency to use them or lose them. We have to hurry up and lose them before the Russian missiles hit ours. So we need to take them off of high alert. And of course, we need to stop the modernization and stop all arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Another word about modernization. The ICBMs are in those 5 Western states, and guess who's the representative from Wyoming? Liz Cheney. And the Omnicider, where is it going to be built? In Utah. Guess who's the senator there? Mitt Romney. Watch out for Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney. We must continually remind ourselves what Coretta Scott King campaigned for many years. A whole lot depends on nuclear disarmament. So a peace action motto is peace demands action. So here are some action alerts. I know not everybody is in the districts of Andy Levin and Brenda Lawrence, but I figured most of us would be, but I know it goes beyond that. But this applies to all of our congressional representatives. They should co-sponsor HR 669, which requires the president to get congressional approval to launch a first strike weapon. And Ted Lieu of California is the sponsor of that one. And then good old Barbara Lee just keeps on coming to repeal the authorizations for the use of military force. So they need to repeal both of those. The danger is that Biden is kind of in favor of repealing them, but he wants to replace them. His opinion is they need to be replaced with more narrow AUMFs that have a time to expire, for example. And then House Joint Resolutions 15 and 16 stop the arms sales to Saudi Arabia. That is the way we think to help Yemen. Now, in conclusion, some action alerts, or actually a action alert for our senators, Gary Peters and Debbie Stabenow. Peters and Stabenow came in late to support and vote for the Iran deal. I am sure they are being lobbied to support negotiations with Iran on all kinds of issues, which, as I said, will negate the deal. It would be great if Peters and Stabenow would get on board now with Senator Ed Markey, his Iran Diplomacy Act of 2021. I just learned yesterday, peace action. And when I say peace action, I mean national peace action. The largest anti-war, anti-nuclear group in the country, of which we are an affiliate. Peace Action is sponsoring a day for us to call our senators to urge them to support the Iran deal. And that's going to be April 1. So put April 1 on your calendar and be sure to call then or call now. Well, how do you keep up to date? I recommend the Peace Action of Michigan website, peaceactionmich.org. I invite you to make every day a day of peacemaking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rich. That was great. So do we have some questions in the chat room? Melanie?
Yes, there's, let me see. With Jennifer Granholm, former Michigan governor, as Secretary of Energy overseeing our nuclear program, do we in Michigan have special responsibilities to lobby her on policy?
Yes, we certainly do. And we have a very budding coalition of peace groups across the state, which includes some Democrats. So maybe we have a chance to get Jennifer Granholm to come back home, and we can talk about the nuclear stockpile that she is in charge of. The largest budget item in the Department of Energy is for nuclear war. So we need to get to the bottom of that, and Jennifer Granholm, she's the one.
That was the only question. There is a raise hand function.
Okay. Do you see the raised hand, Melanie? So Melanie, I think what you were saying, if people could raise their hand if they have a question.
That you
Well, I'm going to call on, I don't know if Melanie can see this, but I'll call on
I
Diane.
don't see it.
Diane, I think you have a question. You can unmute yourself.
Yes. I'm sorry that I missed almost all of your program because I completely forgot that you were on at this time. And I'm wondering if you will have it recorded so that we can, people who have missed it can hear the entire presentation, which I missed, unfortunately.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, it has been recorded. Yes.
So it's going to be on Facebook and also YouTube.
Excellent. And what is it called?
You just put in HWPEACE YouTube and you'll get to it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And hi, Colleen.
Terry?
What about the slides? Will you be able to distribute the slides?
I can put the slides, well, on Facebook too, I assume. It's a PowerPoint presentation, so there ought to be a way that we can put it out there.
Well, the slides, I mean, the whole presentation will show once
That's right.
once it's posted, you'll see the slides. If you want to use the slides for another purpose, that's up to Rich if he wants you to do that.
Maybe you
You
could
may
put the
use-
slides on the Peace Action website.
Yes, I'll put the slides on the Peace Action website, and you can use the slides without my voice. That's fine.
Okay, do we have any other questions, Melanie? I think I saw one, but I can't, oh. Shall I call on Valerie? Valerie, unmute yourself. You need to unmute yourself. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, good. Mike, I just wondered if you would go over the legislation a little bit more in detail so that we would be more capable of discussing it.
Sure. Would you like me to put those slides back up?
Sure, why not?
Let's see if I can do that. Okay. Senator Markey's bill is really what you call a sense of the Congress or the sense of the Senate, that the Biden administration should prioritize diplomacy as it deals with Iran. So it doesn't have a number yet, but it's a way of encouraging the Biden administration to deal with diplomacy. And as I continue to repeat, Biden is under pressure because I think it's AIPAC is organizing letters from Congress people to Biden, which want to negotiate the missiles, the region, terrorist groups, you name it. That will not fly. It just won't fly. So once again, we dropped out. We need to take the first step to drop in. There's a phrase, compliance for compliance. So as we comply, they comply. As they comply, we comply. Now that's a tricky dance, but that's the kind of road that we need to travel. Ted Lieu's bill doesn't solve everything, but at least it puts the no first use policy into discussion. A no first use would really lessen the tensions around the world and create openings for negotiations. And Barbara Lee voted against the Iraq War, the only one. She has continued to put in bills to repeal the AUMFs. I've seen varying numbers, but the AUMFs have been used to attack not just Afghanistan and Iraq, but anywhere from 10 to 20 other countries. It's a loose cannon. It's a loose cannon. It really is. And connected to that is what's called the OCO, the Overseas Contingency Operations Fund. And that money was originally set for conducting the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. But as the cost of those wars has gone down, the Pentagon uses that money for other things. It's become a slush fund. And so the AUMFs and the Overseas Contingency Operations Fund, both of those, need to go. And the only leverage we really have in terms of stopping the carnage in Yemen is with Saudi Arabia. And I think that Biden needs to stop all the arms sales. That is the only leverage we have. Hope that's helpful.
I think Steve Gold had his hand up. Steve, you there?
Yeah. Rich, have either of our senators, Stabenow or Peters, expressed their views on decreasing the DoD budget and repurposing the funds?
When Bernie Sanders put in the bill to cut defense spending or Pentagon spending by 10%, neither one of them voted for it. Okay. In the House, we got some votes. And since I'm Andy Levin's district, I know that he voted to cut it by 10%. And I think almost all the Democrats in the House voted for it. But our senators, the answer to that is no. And the letters you get from them are always have a line like, thank you for your views. I will keep them in front of me in case something comes before me on my agenda.
Great.
You
That's
said it.
why you just have to keep calling them and letting them know.
That's right.
Here's another question. We are faced with so many issues to address: AUMF, nuclear posture, Yemen, base reduction, and others. How do we decide in which order to address these? The National FCNL, with several groups across the country, I guess, is focusing on repeal of the AUMF. Is that a broadly shared starting point we should join in?
I think the number one issue is the Iran deal, because if things do not improve, when Iran conducts its elections in June, hardliners will win. Rouhani cannot run again. So something needs to happen now, because campaigning will be starting very soon. So the Iran deal is number one. And you're right, there are so many issues, but that's at the top. And we just have to stay tuned to see what pops up and might be viable.
Okay, one other comment or question is, what about the new digital wars with China and Russia hacking into our intelligence? I don't know if that's a question or that's just a comment, but Colleen has a question.
Well, my question is for all of you. When you're calling Barbara Lee, thank her for putting in the Department of Peace bill. Ever since Dennis Kucinich retired, she has been the faithful one. And like Rich said, she's the only one that voted against the Iraq war. So she's our peacemaker. And just give her a call and thank her. I will. And I've had success with Senator Peters. He was not for the Iranian nuclear deal. And I wrote to him, and I kid you not, he quoted me. He didn't give me credit, but in his letter, when he made the decision, it was word for word what I sent him practically. But I want to thank you, Rich. It's always wonderful. You're so organized. Thanks so much, and good to see all of you.
Thank you, Colleen. Looks like Ron has a question. Unmute yourself, please, Ron.
Where does Alyssa Slotkin stand on those three main initiatives?
I don't know the answer to that. You know, her background is very interesting, but I don't know how that influences her. So I can't answer that.
Is anybody here in her district who would want to take it up with her? I mean, I've written to her once. I'd be happy to do it again. She's an important voice.
Okay.
Dave?
It looks like Dave Wiley is in Alyssa Slotkin's district also. Is that right, Dave? Shake your.
Yes, yes, and we actually in the FCNL and the United Nations Association and Peace Education Center have an appointment with her and her legislative assistants for military and security affairs. As you say, her background is CIA and U.S. MIL in Iraq. Her husband's a Army helicopter pilot, and two stepdaughters are military medical people. So she really has a strong security background and has not responded affirmatively to a number of our intimations to her, especially on AUMF repeal. But we want to keep at it. And one thing that we realize that's going to perhaps affect all of us here is that we're headed into redistricting and maybe re-gerrymandering all of these lines. And there's a very good chance that this weird Slotkin, Michigan 8th District, which extends from the western suburbs of Detroit through Lansing, is going to be changed as well to have more of a mid-Michigan focus, any rate. But we are trying to make some inroads with Slotkin and would enjoy anyone to join us in that.
I've seen her use her security background to make herself explicitly more liberal on domestic issues. So she's pretty smart about where she's from and what she's doing. And she
Her
was
focus,
yes,
is heavily on the bailout bill just passed,
yes.
and on healthcare.
Right.
She ran her campaign around her mother's painful death of cancer and the expensive it was without Obamacare. But I think it's going to be a tough one to crack her policy on military affairs. She actually worked for the DOD as a deputy assistant secretary of DOD, so a strong history there.
Between Ron and Dave, we have a budding connection among some of the Detroit area peaceniks and those in the more Lansing area. So there may be times when it's important for representatives from both Metro Detroit and Lansing to be together. It's good for representatives to hear a cross section of geography from people.
Yes.
Okay, so Rich, this was expanded. What about the new digital wars with China and Russia hacking into our intelligence centers and potential power grids, etc.? How concerned is Congress?
Well, that's another question I really don't have an insight into. What I will say is that the Pentagon is geared up to fight yesterday's wars with battleships, aircraft carriers, and so forth. It is not geared up for other kinds of sabotage. So in addition to reducing Pentagon spending, the priorities need to be radically changed.
And I don't see any more questions or hands at this point.
I'll add one advertisement. There was a time when Chuck Altman and I sat in Representative Gary Peters' office for over half an hour, and the phone never rang. It really is important for us to call. And I know that at least last year on Monday mornings, Senator Peters' Michigan and Washington staff, there was a staff meeting. And what was reported were the number of phone calls that came in the last week and the issues that they represented. So I say this also in terms of writing letters to the newspaper. Your letter may not get printed, but if your letter is one of 15, maybe letter number 15 will get printed. So you never can tell when a letter or a phone call might actually be a tipping point. Go for it.
So Dave, did
When
you?
I'm sorry, Linda. So when I ask people to call on immigration issues, which is where I usually am working on, I often tell them call after hours. If you don't want to talk to a person, just leave a message, because that message gets the same hash mark as if you actually talk to a person who's not going to really give you a full conversation anyways. You just state your case, and that's it.
Yeah. Yes, if you're one of those, was it Garrison Keeler, those shy people, call after hours.
Right. So there's a plug for mothers walking women walking woodward for peace on Mother's Day.
It looks like Sybil has a question. Go ahead, unmute yourself, Sybil.
Yeah, a comment and a question. I think your point about making those calls is really important, because I hear a lot of folks saying, well, Gary and Debbie, they're liberal. They know what's right. They'll do it. We don't have to do that anymore. But, you know, what I'm hearing tonight, they're not as automatically going to vote the way we want them to vote without continuing to let them know how we feel. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask if you've had any interactions with my Congresswoman, Haley Stevens.
Good question. I'm afraid that I have not. Sybil, you raise what's been called the consensus in Washington, D.C. And there are 3 or 4 points to it, but the consensus basically is Pentagon spending is okay, nuclear weapons are needed for deterrent, and we let Israel do whatever it wants to do. So, you know, among Republicans and Democrats, that's just kind of that's the way it is. I'll make 2 quick plugs. April 10th is Peace Action's Charlie King free concert. You can send your email to me if you'd like an invitation, rjpeacock@huawei.com. And June 10th, we will present Vincent Intonde. He's a professor in Maryland. He's written the classic book, African Americans Against the Bomb. He traces from 1945 up until fairly recently how African Americans have been very much against the nuclear arsenal. And he'll be talking about the intersection between race and nuclear weapons on June 10th.
Oh, that was great. Do we have any further comments or questions? I would personally like to thank Rich for a wonderful presentation, and like some of the
I have a
comments.
question.
Oh, go ahead, Diane.
Okay. A comment, actually. Somebody was talking about Haley, asking out Haley Stevens. I tried 3 different times to get to her to understand the importance of what Trump was doing in getting money to research and develop a quote, usable nuke. And then after he got the money and he developed that, and they had manufactured all these little usable nukes. He wanted to put them in all the nuclear submarines in our fleet, so that anytime, somebody was, aggravating Trump, all he had to do was say, okay, shoot one of these usable nukes, no environmental, destruction or anything like that. And we'll hit the target right away. Nobody else will die and all that kind of stuff. And I tried 3 times, and they said, okay, we'll give her the message and we'll get back to you about her conic. Never a word. So she obviously did not think there was anything important about nuclear weapons. That's my comment.
Okay.
Yes, that's very sad. Climate change is going to take a couple of decades to destroy our existence, but a nuclear war could end our existence in one afternoon.
Yeah.
So.
Well, on that cheerful note.
Rich, this was really a great presentation.
Thank you.
Many comments talking about how complicated it is, and yet you make it understandable, and I want to second that. I think
Thank
it's
you.
so valuable that you're able to do that, and I am thinking maybe we should send out something as a follow-up of some particular actions to take to make it even more simple and action-oriented, because you really presented so much, and I think it'll make us all feel better if we can really do something and learn to make those phone calls, etc.
Well, I can certainly help get us informed about the April 1st Orion Call-in Day. That's April Fool's Day, so we'll probably, don't be a fool, call up your senator.
That sounds good. Great. So thank you again. It was really a wonderful presentation. And thank you everybody for coming tonight and joining us. It was great. It's great to see you. We'll be sending out information about our upcoming meetings. Again, they're going to be about voter suppression and racial justice. So those are also very important topics, of course. So we'll see you then. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom. Shantae, peace.
Absolutely. Peace be with you.
Rich, are you still there?
Yes, I am, Joanne.
Rich, why don't you write out the actions that you would like to be taken, maybe a 1-page, 8.5 by 11 kind of bullet point.
Yes.
And then, I'll send it out to our Google group.
Okay.
And then also mention they can refer to the meeting via YouTube or our Facebook page.
Sure thing. Okay. Do you want that in a regular email or a Word? Does it make any difference?
I'd rather have it not in Word or
okay.
Just so I can put it in the body of the email.
Sure thing.
Okay?
No sweat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Does anybody want to hang out? You can hang out. If not, you're dismissed. Sometimes people like to hang out.
Sybil, it looks like you're outside, but are you inside?
Yeah, that's just my standard backdrop.
Okay, it's so good to see you. Sybil was my gym teacher for a minute back when I was little.
Oh my gosh.
And she was, I think you were a student teacher.
Yeah, I was. That was
Yeah.
a long time ago.
Yeah, like 60 years ago or more.
At least.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Scary, eh?
Yeah, but more things
So I'm
change.
glad. Are you? Oh, okay. Sorry, my dog's barking.
But it's nice to see us old people being so energetic and active.
It's true, that's true, and we certainly are active, that's for sure.
Well, they say one of the, you can train people to be aware of their implicit bias for racism and sexism, but the two that they still haven't figured out how to do is ageism and tattoos. So think about that. And the ageism is particularly anti-old and particularly anti-old female. So
I've
you
noticed that.
guys have to polish a little.
Good point.
But when you think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's right behind Sybil, yep,
Yeah.
that's doing old very well.
Yeah,
Didn't, oh, yep.
she's a new role model, huh, for the older person.
Well, I was making a whole list of them because there's this wonderful book called In Our Prime, how older women are something about the road ahead. And it's just full of a whole lot of examples of some of the older people. And one friend of mine said, well, Gloria Steinem,
That's
and
true.
she's
but-
still kicking.
So
I don't know how old
is,
she is.
so is Angela Davis
Right, that's
and
right.
Jane Fonda. And
Jane Fonda is like 83.
yeah.
Yeah, she's making a comeback.
Never been gone.
Although it's a 5-part series last night, and you could probably YouTube it. And it just took her from the very beginning to now. And wow, it was very revealing. I mean,
Yeah.
Look
And
that up.
how about Barbara Lee? She's up there, isn't she? Is she older? Rich? You're
You're on mute, Rich. Oh, there you are.
I think so, but I can't put an
mean,
age.
when
Yeah.
I think about her, I think it seems like she's been around a long time. I can't, I'll look it up.
Well, it's interesting that the older people we've been mentioning are all women. If women ruled the world, we could be in better shape.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's for sure.
especially in the Peace Department. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
well, Michigan's got a good start up there with my neighbor Dana Nessel, and
Barbara Lee
Yeah.
is only 74.
Barbara Lee, okay.
Only 74. I mean, she's younger
Okay.
than Bernie.
Yeah, 1946, so okay. Yeah, and look at Nancy Pelosi, she's
Oh,
81
yes.
or something like that.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
yeah.
All right. So, should I end this meeting? I think
Sure.
I think when I end it, it actually ends it.
I think so.
Or,
Okay, all right. It
Thank
was
you
really
all.
great. Great,
Yeah,
Rich.
welcome.
It was a
You're
really a
welcome.
great,
Terrific.
great presentation.
Good.
Thank
thanks
you.
again. Okay,
Yeah.
You're
bye-bye.
welcome.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Rich.
You're
Good night.
welcome.
See you later.